Hey everyone, this is Ben Cecchini, founder of Give and Grow, here with another episode of the Give and Grow podcast. This is our social emotional learning series, and I'm super excited to introduce to you today Tony Yang. Tony is an elementary school counselor out in Rochester, Minnesota, with his master's in science and counselor education. He also has his own podcast called School Counselors Beyond, where he dives into basically how you would counsel what's the word I'm looking for here?
Yeah, fictional characters and
Fictional
their
characters.
fictional
There we
world.
go. And their fictional world. So I was really happy to hear that because I've heard of that being a really powerful tool. Before we dive any deeper onto these sorts of things, Tony, just thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me onto your podcast, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited once again just to pick your brain and hopefully definitely share some tips, tools, techniques that are going to help parents out there raise healthy, loving human beings. I mean, that's the goal of this show. That's the goal of our organization with Give and Grow. And I know that that's an overlapping goal with the majority of counselors that I meet, is like empowering the parents with the stuff that you know and you've been trained to teach and support students with in the school setting. So, Tony, kind of to kick things off, can you just break down just a real quick, what is social emotional learning in your eyes, and how does it support both academic success and emotional well-being in kids?
Yeah, so socially emotional learning, it's kind of like a very broad kind of umbrella term that now many people are referring to as kind of like life skills, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how you can kind of get along with others, how you kind of manage yourself, your emotions, your awareness to others and yourself. And so all of these skills you learn throughout your life are very important to kind of your academic success, your kind of career outlook, things like that. And so as a school counselor, especially at the elementary level, we really try to facilitate and encourage that building, that knowledge of kind of those social emotional skills that students can practice at the schools, at home, in the community, things like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really, equipping kids with, the life skills they need to kind of learn more about themselves and kind of interact with the world around them.
Yeah, I love that, and that's why I started this show, is to be able to share some of these ways that you go about, and the other people that we've had on the show go about teaching those skills and understanding their importance, because obviously there's so many studies out there that show it supports academic success, it supports real world success in the job force, relationship success, and longevity. So many benefits of these skills. Can you share a little bit around how you typically approach some of these skills, or how you would initiate, some of those conversations or skill building activities with elementary age kids?
Yeah, so as a school counselor, our school counseling program, we kind of do tiered supports. It's through something called MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, where we kind of start at the tier one level, which is kind of like all students have access to like my school counseling lessons. So like classroom lessons, I go into the classrooms to kind of talk about some of those topics. For example, in October, we do a lot of bullying prevention. And so I'll give a
Mm-hmm.
lot of lessons on that every student receives. We'll do like coping skill lessons for like the younger students, and more of like kind of like social lessons for like kind of the upper elementary students. So that's kind of where it starts with that. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's something we call tier two, which is kind of like small groups where, some students may need a little bit more help, a little bit more practice and kind of practicing their skills or learning or acquiring some of these skills and knowledge. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'll kind of get teacher feedback or parent feedback or even student feedback. A student might say, "Hey, Mr. Yang, like, can you help me with some friendship skills?" And I'll say, "Okay, let me think. I can create like a friendship small group where we can practice learning some of these skills
Mm-hmm.
together." And so that's kind of that tier two, more targeted with that group of students. And then there's a tier three, which is more like intensive counseling and or kind of outside referrals and working in partnership with the community. And so for those students who may need a little bit more, help, that's a very collaborative part of like, working with their families, working with community resources, but also occasionally providing that one-on-one kind of support
Mm-hmm.
for that one student, of of like, okay, how can we, work together one on one? How can I really work with you intensively, for a
Mm-hmm.
few weeks, and hopefully we can, build again that skill, that social emotional skill, or that, whatever it is that can help you succeed at school.
Yeah,
And so those, yeah,
I love that. Sorry to cut you off there towards the end. I'm curious. You talk about the 3 tier. I think that's really great to be able to like kind of, okay, where might my kid fall? Do I feel like they could need a lot of support right now in this area of getting along, like building life skills, social emotional awareness, those sorts of things, or are they kind of in that general public like, hey, I know this is important, but my kids kind of, they're doing their thing. They're grooving and feeling good, and in that sort of scenario, kind of speaking towards that, the tier 1 kids, if you will, do you kind of teach? I know you mentioned like with the younger kids, the coping skills are some of the first things that you teach them, and with the older kids there's a little more focus on the social skills. Is that something that you would like invite parents to focus on as well, like when their kids are younger, the coping skills, and older get into the social stuff?
yeah, definitely. I work at a K-5 school, and you definitely see kind of the developmental abilities of students as they kind of progress through the grades. It's really incredible to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, starting out, kindergarten, first grade students, a lot of it, they're still very kind of living in their own kind of world to some degree. And so just
Mm-hmm.
kind of equipping them with those skills of like, okay, when you're feeling angry, what does that look like? What can we do when we're angry?
Mm-hmm.
And even like feeling identification. So, typically, kids are just taught like, oh, you're either angry, sad, or happy, right? And so just kind of helping them with a bigger vocabulary of, oh, what does frustrated look like? Or what does being too silly look like? Or, maybe you're a little worried, and so kind of
Mm-hmm.
building that foundation of kind of helping connecting with kids at that level. Then I'd say definitely come fourth and fifth grade, things become a lot more social. Friendships start changing. Kids start kind of being interested in other things. They're a little bit more independent now. They're expected more academically, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's where you start seeing a lot of those social awareness, social I wouldn't say issues, but social struggles here and there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I find that a lot of my work in those upper elementary grades are kind of focused around that, especially with like gossiping or competitiveness and things like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that's kind of where that starts becoming a thing. And of course, middle school and high school, a lot of it is very social. That's
Mm-hmm.
where you really start forming your identity and really trying to find your own people and staying with them, connecting with them. And so it's kind of fun at the K-5 level, kind of seeing that whole spectrum of, behaviors and growth and things that kids are going through. But generally, yeah, if you're a parent who has, a kid in like lower elementary, a lot of it is just, really just kind of get to know them, like talking about feelings, talking about how to handle that. And then come upper elementary, that social factor starts coming in, and
Mm-hmm.
helping those your kid kind of navigate those social situations.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me, and I really appreciate you breaking that down. When you talk about like helping these younger kids, what is it like K2, K3 maybe, where it's really focused on like what am I feeling, building that vocabulary, developing some coping skills. Is that about the age group that you're referring to? Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
And so like when you're working with that group, how might, cuz we had that conversation just before we got on here just about like using Harry Potter or other fictional characters or movies, books, those sorts of things. How might you incorporate that, and how successful has that been for you kind of working with the amounts of students that you do through school?
Yeah, I'd say, K2, K3, I do a lot of not necessarily bibliotherapy is what we call it, but it's just, using a book as a reference, right? Finding
Mm-hmm.
a book that kind of talks about a social emotional, struggle or a social emotional issue, and really trying to connect that with the students and kind of asking them kind of like, oh, what do you think this character is feeling? Or what do you think is
Mm-hmm.
going on? Or what do you think might happen next? Or maybe how do you think this student or this character can handle this situation? Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's a book that I like to read to a lot of my first graders, which is called "What If Everybody Did That," and it kind of teaches them that kind of social awareness. It's kind of goes through this kid who kind of does all these things like, oh, throws, instead of throwing his garbage in like the garbage can, he just tosses it on the floor or outside in the
Hmm.
park. And the question is, oh, what if everybody did that? And as I'm walking through these children's book, like pointing to some of the characters and saying, asking my students, what do you think this student, or what do you think this character is feeling right now? And or what if everybody did that, how would you feel? And so
Hmm.
uh, so books are a great resource to, even if it's not a specific social emotional book, like
Right.
just that story and those pictures and kind of the messages can really kind of connect with kids, and kind of you want to kind of engage with them and see what they think, how they are viewing it,
Hmm.
and how they're kind of interpreting the story.
That's what I'm really hearing in the way you're breaking down how you approach a bibliotherapy, a book
Mhm.
reading with kids is really asking them those questions so they can kind of come to their own answers, explore it, maybe take a second to pause. And that seems to be something that every counselor that I've talked with on this show or psychologist really encourages, is just those open-ended questions and empowering them to come up with their own answers by doing
Mhm.
so. So it's cool to just, I'm sure you're seeing those similarities with the kids that you work with. I'm seeing those similarities in the different approaches with counselors, and that's a big one that I really appreciate, especially preparing for parenthood. And you're a parent of two kids yourself, right?
Yep, I got a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old at home. So
Yes,
yes.
yes. So like maybe for parents with kids in that age group, even if we're even getting younger than that, K to 5, what are some of those simple things you're just like starting off with?
Yeah, so like with my 3-year-old, some things we do, like going back to kind of books and watching shows here and there, is yeah, just kind of asking her, like looking at the pictures and asking her, oh, what do you notice about this character right now, or this picture? How do you think this person's feeling? So yeah, my daughter, she's still really into like Disney and all of that, and so
Hmm.
we'll read kind of a book and a story, and they'll have like messages like, oh, like this character, like Jessie, she feels like she can do it, or she believes in herself. And
Hmm.
I'll ask my daughter, like, like when you're feeling frustrated, and or you're feeling like you can't do something, can you use those same words? And we'll kind of repeat and quote some of the things that we read
Hmm.
and or watch and things like that. Especially around 3 and 4 years old, like these kids, they're just absorbing everything. And
Right.
so just kind of reflecting back and using that shared language of the books you're reading with each other, or like the shows you're watching with each other, really makes an impact and kind of helps them
Hmm.
kind of look at it and kind of try to move on too. And so
Yeah.
so that's been great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's really landing for me just how you're utilizing entertainment and then introducing these important life skills through the entertainment, because I'm not anti screen time, or obviously like books have been praised and utilized in so many beneficial ways for education, for entertainment, but really utilizing these things that we have that kids are already attracted to and inspired by, Disney, Harry Potter, whatever it is, and then bringing these skills into it. That's truly our approach with Give and Grow, is like, let's take music, movement, and like just the fun things, even athletes or celebrities, and them talking about their meditation practices, or them talking about them doing a specific breathing, or having a conflict and how they solved it with their partner or their teammate. And it's like we can really lean on the things that are already inspiring our kids, and then bring in meaningful conversation around that for skill building purposes. Um,
Yeah, totally, totally.
yeah, it's really cool to see that you're doing that with your students in school. What what's something, kind of shifting back to just like really focusing on some tips for parents here? What's something that you'd like to remind parents that will support them and their kids when things start to get a little chaotic or out of control at home, or while they're together?
Yeah, one thing when I'm thinking about that is is setting boundaries. So, that's a big thing at school that we try to establish too. Whether it's a physical boundary or like a social boundary, especially with my upper elementary students with like more of those social issues. A lot of them, I tell them, okay, well, what is your friendship boundary? Like if a friend or someone else were to cross your friendship boundary, like lie about you or talk behind your back, like would that how would you feel with that? And
Mm-hmm.
so um, I'd say with parents, yeah, it's just kind of developing those boundaries with your kid, and making sure that your kid has their own boundaries, or they kind of understand why they're important, and you kind of
Mm-hmm.
have your boundary as a parent too with them of like, hey, if I'm asking you to kind of help around the house with chores or something,
Mm-hmm.
like that's kind of an expectation or a boundary, and if boundaries are crossed, how can we work together and kind of reestablishing things or fixing this
Mm-hmm.
together? um, I find that kids who kind of have those boundaries set can really focus more on themselves a lot easier than some kids who may not have, or may not understand boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just that concept of, defining and setting a boundary is really crucial for kind of managing behaviors, or just managing just issues in general with
Mm-hmm.
kids and with your kid.
Yeah. So a quick follow-up question on that, Tony. Like if you were coaching a parent around like a boundary setting, I don't even know if you specifically set like a time, but like how would you invite a parent to set a boundary with their kid?
Yeah, so a lot of it depends on their behaviors too, right? So let's
Mm-hmm.
say maybe um, let's see, technology, for example. We just kind of talked about screen time, right?
Right.
So being the parent, just making sure you're kind of firm on that, that time limit of, hey, we're only watching 30 minutes a day or something like that of your favorite show, right? And then that's that boundary, right? We're not going to cross
Mm-hmm.
that. And if we do cross that, like let's talk about some of the consequences that that come from that. And so really having that dialogue with your child about that. For example, my own daughter, like yeah, I understand the issues related to screen time. On the other hand, like technology is just so, so ingrained in our lives, and so I
Right.
do allow her, like maybe 30 minutes a day of watching like an episode of Sesame Street or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
but no more than that. And just making sure, okay, just reiterating to her like, okay, now we're done, like
Mm-hmm.
let's go find something else to do. Let's read a book, or let's paint, or let's draw. And so as the parent, really just kind of enforcing that boundary too with that with your child. And if they, again, it will take time to develop that and to understand that and to formulate that, but typically just kind of holding firm too as the parent, of
Right.
making sure that you're following through with it with your child, because little things can, as boundaries can shift, right? So if you if you kind of relax a little bit, it kind of shifts more and more and more, and then eventually it could lead to just not being a boundary at all, which can cause further issues down the road. And so it can be tough, but yeah, that's kind of where it starts. It's kind of starting with something that the two of you can agree on, such as just 30 minutes at most a
Mm-hmm.
day, and kind of staying firm with that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it sounds like also that conversation is happening there's before it just gets out of control, right? Before it's like your
Mhm.
kids watching an hour, okay, that's enough. No, it's like, okay, we're going to agree on this before we even really start. And then we're going to
Mhm.
continue to reinforce that over and over again. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that here. And yeah, to your point, just acknowledging that it can be a challenging thing to maintain
Mhm.
those boundaries or set them, or it can bring up a conflict in between you and your child. But staying strong, holding that boundary, especially if it's something that you know is necessary with your kid. Can you talk a little bit about what some healthy habits, routines, practices, even that parents can adopt to raise healthy kids, mentally, physically resilient kids?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing, and parenting is tough, but the first thing is remembering that you are modeling a lot of like behaviors and social interactions, right? And so, even though it may seem that your kid may not be watching or listening to you and your partner, or you and just whoever you're interacting with, they may be kind of absorbing it, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
just remember that, hey, you're modeling these behaviors to your kids. So, for example, like if there's a conflict, right? And let's say, you know, you're maybe upset or you're feeling frustrated, like your child might be watching you. And so, like, what can you do as the adult, the parent, right, to kind of self regulate so they kind of learn that too, or they kind of pick up
Mm-hmm.
on that. Um, and part of that too includes like co-regulation. So especially with students and specifically even my daughter, a lot of it is, okay, you look like you're feeling upset. Like, okay, let's take some deep breaths. Let's count to
Mm-hmm.
4. And so doing that with my daughter kind of helps her practice that. And it becomes like kind of just rote memory at that point where
Right.
I'll say, all right, like you look kind of frustrated right now. What do you think you can do? And she'll say, "Oh yeah, take a deep breath and count to 4." And I'll say, "Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's do it together." So kind of modeling those positive behaviors, but also kind of co-regulating with your
Yeah.
child with that. Um, and yeah, and even like kind of another strategy I use too is kind of giving that student and my child like prompts, right? So like, if there's a if my daughter's out on the playground with other kids and there's a disagreement, right? I might prompt her and say, okay, like what can you say to this other kid? Like, like do you think you can say, oh, can I have a turn? Right. And then like that'll kind of give her words or kind of a prompt to say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'll try to use that with that other kid and, kind of just watch that and just see how she does with that. And then whether
Mm-hmm.
she's, successful or not, a lot of it is just trying to practice that,
Right.
those positive behaviors and
Mm-hmm.
kind of guiding your kids with that. And so,
Yeah.
so modeling and, again, co-regulating and then kind of giving your kid like prompts, strategies that they can use in those social situations.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. Where do you go for, obviously you've been trained, but maybe where could a parent go to find some of these regulation skills or tools, strategies, prompts even that they could use with their kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so school counselors, we are definitely trained in a lot of this. We've gone through grad school to kind of learn all these different skills and techniques too. And we have our continuing education, professional development of practicing and learning more, techniques and skills. And so I would say that would be kind of your first resource would be kind of your school. So if you're a parent and you really don't have any idea of like how to help or any ideas of like how to skill build with your child, talking to your teacher, your student's teacher, or your child's teacher, or their school counselor, their school social worker is kind of like the first place to start with that
Mm-hmm.
kind of community resource. Um, yeah, after that, they should be able to provide those resources or at least kind of help you along with those. Other than that, I'd say, really creating dialogue, being part of maybe a parent group or being part of trying to find like different groups that kind of are going through the same thing as you and kind of asking them for any tips they've got or any expertise
Mm-hmm.
they have. I know in Rochester we have like a lot of community education classes for parents and for
Nice.
toddlers, and so just kind of being a part of those community education classes is very kind of helpful in kind of forming that community, but also kind of
Mm-hmm.
gaining a lot of important knowledge and skills as a parent too.
Yeah, those sound really, really valuable. I would love to be in a spot. I'm sure there are some where I'm even at in the middle of nowhere in Costa Rica, but like I'm sure there are some spots and I'm happy to hear that you have those as well as just offering that invitation to reach out to the school. There are these people that have gone to graduate school, to learn these skills and to understand these tools and try it. I mean, you're around hundreds of kids, I'm sure, every single day, trying these things out. So the resources here, and I just want people to know that it doesn't mean your kid is falling behind or that you're not doing your job as a parent. You mentioned the village. village, Tony, and it's like the community is necessary, and we can lean on each other for this type of support. Is there anything you want to add to kind of that sentiment, like for any parents that might be a little worried?
Oh yeah, totally. It does take a village to, raise and nurture and cultivate your children, and I just want parents to kind of understand, or hopefully they, understand that, because I think there's a lot of pressure to being like, oh, the right parent and doing the right thing for your kids, and it's a normal thing to feel. I think it's a very human experience. All of us kind of feel like that. Like, oh, we're not
Mm-hmm.
enough for a kid, or we're not doing enough for a kid. Um, but at the end of the day, every child is so unique, and so one solutions may not work for your child or another child, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so really leaning on the community, really leaning on the school, leaning on people, and working in partnership is so important, and I know it's kind of hard to have that humility of asking for help, which I
Mm-hmm.
get to as a parent. Sometimes I'm glad I have my wife who really kind of pushes me to be like, hey, like, talk to these parents here, about how to help Naomi or your daughter and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think part of it is kind of looking at yourself as a parent and saying like, okay, yeah, I do need some help,
Mm-hmm.
and accepting that, yes, my child, I can't do everything for my child. I want to, but what other knowledge can I get from other people so that, they can help me and I can help my child. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I hope that we become more of a holistic society when it comes to childcare and raising children and things like that. Because again, it's a tough it's tough being a parent,
Mm-hmm.
and it's tough
Mm-hmm.
raising children in today's world. So really remembering like, hey, there's people that are probably in your shoes right now at this moment, and the first step is to kind of seek that help and admit that, hey, like, you can't do everything.
Yeah, yeah, Tony, I really appreciate you sharing that. I couldn't have said it better myself. I just like love that encouraging aspect, and that's typically how I like to end things off here on the show, just because it's inspiring. It's inspiring to hear it, especially from somebody in this professional space. So if you're here listening and you've been struggling or going through it, or even if you just want to continue to grow and show up in a more powerful way for your kids, you feel like you're doing great. These resources and these people in your community that live and breathe this stuff, that are passionate about it and want to help, are so valuable of a resource. Tony, is there any place that people can listen to your podcast or get in touch with you if they have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, the only social media I really have is LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn. Besides that, my podcasts should be on Amazon Music, iTunes, Spotify, and so look for me there for
Yep.
School Counselors Beyond. That's what it's called.
School
So,
Counselors Beyond.
mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Tony, thank you so much once again for all your time and energy and sharing everything that you did today. It's a true pleasure to get to know you and to collaborate in this share.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, for inviting me and for this opportunity to kind of help you and give and grow and help any parents who are listening to this podcast.
Amazing. Thanks again.